Thanks for joining, everybody. Appreciate it. This week, we are talking about how to price your listing. So pricing your listing is super important. And honestly, it can make or break the deal for some sellers. They're going to challenge you. Sellers have so much information right now, which is actually fantastic. I personally feel like it makes my job easier with all the information that they have. So I'm not educating them on the entire ramp up of property values, location, your neighbor's sale price, but it also can be dangerous, right? They have so much information that they are going to challenge you. So if you are not totally ready, totally equipped, and have all of the data dialed, you're going to have some problems and you might not get that listing. And that's a problem. That's how we build our business. I had a very high success rate in my listing presentation to conversions. I never did the actual math, but I think it's probably 95% on the listings that I went to and got the deal. And I was always super prepared. Some brokers on this call have told me they've spent hours on their pricing, which is maybe a lot in the beginning, but understandable. So we're going to run through some of the high level processes that I've taken and what I think you guys need to do to get your property listed and have the confidence to price it well. Joe has done some fantastic videos on our training. There's some tutorials out there. You really have to watch those as well. Our listing process is really bulletproof. So watch my videos and definitely go through the training. Once your listing appointment is done, you have a follow-up email with the seller and you need to get them the suggested list price. And that number, like I said, is going to dictate potentially whether you get that listing or not. And it's definitely going to bang out some follow-up questions. So in your data to the seller, make sure you're super specific. Some sellers are going to be more relationship based and they're not going to grill you as much on pricing and they're going to trust you. But there are going to be people that do not and are interviewing multiple brokers and want to know exactly how you came to that pricing strategy and what the pricing list price means. I always let people know that I was going to list your home at the right price, meaning my data showed that I would historically sell within 98 to 99% of the list price. That was always my goal. I was never the guy that went in and shot for the moon and tried to get the listing and tell them it was worth $1 million and then sell at 80% of list price. That is fool's gold. That does not work. Long-term, you're not going to be the reliable broker. People want to know actual values. And honestly, Americans in general, we just don't negotiate for a lot of items. So coming into a real estate pricing strategy, you want to let your sellers know that we want to price it right. Because if you overprice it, you're going to miss the eyeballs. And eyeballs are viewers and eyeballs are buyers. And if you don't have people walking through your door, or the wrong people walking through your door, you're not going to get an offer. I get it a million times. What about the lowball offer? What if we price it high and maybe we just wait for a lowball? No, you're missing your audience. And our audience is pricing the property correctly, getting it sold in the 30-day window at the right price. 95 to 100% of list price is our goal always. We're not a negotiating culture. People are comfortable negotiating a little bit, but not massively. And they're going to look within their budget, the right budget. So get yourself a comp set and understand what you're looking for. You have to build the hold on one second here. Sorry, Paul. So number one, also, do not call Matt and ask him to price your listing. That is not a strategy. Okay. If there's an outlier and there's a very random property that you want to chat about, fine. But I am not here to price all of your guys' listings. I am here to help guide you through the process and give you the tools and the training, but you guys have to do the work. And again, I've talked to brokers that are on this call that have spent hours researching property, hours pricing property, and that's okay. You're going to get better every single time you do it. So get your listing details sorted out. That means the property that you're actually trying to price, you have to have all that info. You want to know the tax, you want to know the lot size, you want to know the condition of the property, you want to know vintage, age of roof, when the last time they've remodeled kitchens, bathrooms. Get all of that information so you can start building your comp set around it. And I start pretty broad. You're going to want to understand the type of property that you're comparing, the location, the size, bed, bath, square footage, and get yourself a 10 or 20 property comp set that you can start with. Then you drill down and you start getting a little bit more detail oriented. You want to scroll through all of the pictures. You want to look at the age of the property, the finishes, the construction type, brick versus frame, acreage, lot size. All of these things are going to dictate the final sale price. The pictures are fantastic from previous sold properties, but also understanding the property that you've been in and that you're pricing, very important, which is why I always say you cannot price it until you've walked through the property, and which is why I talk to all of you brokers when they call me and say, what is it worth? I say, I don't know. I haven't been there and I haven't done 30 to 45 minutes of research to price this property. So do the work, understand the data, understand exactly what you're looking at, and take your time, take notes. Make this a process that you're going through every single time. And honestly, digital notes, handwritten notes, whatever you're doing, make comparables, write down the address, write down what you think is relevant towards the other property that you're comparing against, because you're not going to remember when you're scrolling through 20 properties. And again, the data is important. Taxes, assessments, pricing, all of these things are going to come into play when you're giving that ultimate sale price to the seller. And there is anxiety there. You want to be right because you know you're competing against other brokers and you want to get it right. Also, don't overwhelm your seller. Do not send them a comp set of 20 or 30 properties. It's going to overwhelm them. There are going to be in that comp set 5 or 6 really relevant properties. I don't care what you're pricing, a condo or a single family, that are going to help get you to that number. The outliers, you can leave them in there just so people understand, because some sellers think that they're worth every seller thinks they're worth $100,000 more than what you're going to tell them. And you want to put the outlier in there on both sides of the comp set so they can see, oh, that's what that next price level looks like. And they're going to know, right? It's a reality check for most, but they're going to know. The types of comparables that we typically deal with, I'm going to run through really quick, and some of the data that you want to really focus on. Condos, these are the easiest ones to price out. You're going to find like units in a very small geographic area, potentially even in the building that you're comping, within the last 6 to 9 months. I really don't like to go back any further than that. Maybe a year if you're looking for stuff inside the condo building, maybe even 2 years if you're looking specifically in the condo building itself. But really relevant data is 6 to 9 months in this marketplace. Number of beds, number of baths is super important. If you have a random property, we just sold one on Belden. It was like a 1,500 square foot 2-bedroom. Typically, those would be 3 bedrooms. You can extrapolate and maybe adjust a little bit, but try and stay in the comp set data. 2-bed, 2-bath, age, built, and or remodeled is super important. Finish quality, exterior building type. These are all really important data points to take note when you're using your property versus others. It's one thing I do in the city is a little bit more specific versus suburbs. We're very hyper focused on location. Sometimes our comp sets will literally be a 3 to 4 block or quarter-mile radius. Very tight boundaries. We don't, if we're looking at a property that's east of Ashland, we won't go west of Ashland because these hard borders in the city are going to dictate pricing significantly. So be really conscious of where your property is at, what you're pricing it against, because literally Ashland may be a stone throw from the other house, but if you cross over, it could be a 10% price difference. Understand your location. Use Google Maps, especially to educate yourself on geographic points like shopping, parks, transit, highway. Being too close to those things is also an issue. If you're going to have noise, if you're going to have highway noise, train noise, if you're going to have obstructions, all these things are going to dictate pricing. So make sure you're making notes so when you are speaking with your seller, you tell them why you've made these adjustments. Also, in the pricing category, you're going to know, and your clients probably do this, they have price thresholds. Again, this goes back to pricing correctly, but they're going to have price thresholds. So if you're looking and you know that most buyers are going to cap their pricing at $500,000, and you think the property is worth $505, I would suggest pricing it at $499 just to get the most eyeballs possible on that property. You might get a market price slightly correction over list price and let your sellers know that's your strategy. It's important to understand price thresholds. It also can help you on the bottom side of it, where maybe you think the property is worth 479, but there's very limited inventory, and you're like, honestly, I think we can go to 489 or 499 because one, we're going to capture all those eyeballs. No one's really going to put a price threshold of 489. They're going to use round numbers, 500, things like that. So that's a good thing to talk about when you're limited inventory, buyer demand is strong, and you want to know your seller. You're going to fight for every dollar. Something to talk about if your seller is okay and open to pushing pricing strategies and pricing thresholds. Like I talked about before, sellers know their home. You want to be careful with any missteps or inappropriate comps that are going to call you out on it, and it can potentially cost you the listing. I know myself, I've been on so many hundreds of listing appointments, and it's hard to know every single area really, really well. And I've had sellers challenge me, and I've definitely lost some listings because my lack of knowledge, one, on the property type and or comp set that I was using. I just maybe was too busy and didn't spend enough time on it. So you can never be too informed going into these listing presentations. When comping a house, I'll typically use a larger swath of geographic area just to get a really strong comp set. You're not going to find as many data points as you would in the condo arena. The same rules apply: bed count, bath count, vintage, type of property, lot size. Location is critical, you guys. Block by block, you know that now by being a real estate broker. It's really important to price your properties in a very tight geographic area, even if you're using large comp sets. Also know if your property is on a busy street. We are fighting that fight right now. What a detriment. I mean, that can honestly change pricing 10 to 20%, even more if you're on a busy street versus a quiet suburban street. The suburb people really do not want to hear noise. We've learned that time and time again. One of the trickier ones we have pricing, and it's probably a whole separate call, multi-units. Multi-units are something that we're pricing a lot. We sell a lot of multi-units in my world. We use a cap rate analysis to educate both the sellers and potential buyers on what we feel is market. Right now, we're running at about a 6% cap rate, which takes into consideration your gross rent roll and all of your expenses to spit out a mathematical formulated number that values rental properties. It doesn't take into consideration any of the costs involved with mortgages, which I think is great because mortgage rates fluctuate. So we're looking at a pure play gross rental income situation to help evaluate properties. Same rules apply here, but we're really working on data as far as income versus other properties and what other properties have sold and what kind of income they're producing. It's, like I said, probably a whole separate call. And if you do have multi-units coming up, that is something we definitely can talk about one-on-one. But I'm going to do probably a call maybe with my buddy Fadi on pricing out multi-units and how we go about that strategy and what it looks like using different formulas: cash on cash return, like building / comp sales, and cap rate analysis. There's a lot of data out there to use in that arena. Make sure you're paying attention to finishes, whether this property has a basement, whether it's on public sewer or water. These all come into play as far as values, and you're going to get challenged on them by the seller and buyers. Market conditions always dictate pricing. Buyer market, seller market, limited inventory. Understand what absorption rate you're dealing with in any given market. The beauty of using the MLS and all of the CMAs that Cloud uses and all the MLS tools, you're going to get an average market time. Again, chop out the outliers. Let your sellers know what average market time looks like when you're priced appropriately. And you can see, obviously, the outliers are going to have really random numbers and maybe 10 or 20 price drops on the upside, and on the short side, they may have sold over list. Understand market time, understand your conditions, so you're pricing properties appropriately. You don't want to be that listing broker that's there on a relationship. You get the referral, you price it at $299 and it sells at $350. Like, that is just too much over list price. I love selling over list price, but make sure you're doing it in a range that's acceptable and not where you have egg on your face and the seller's like, what happened? Like, what happened? That's also a bad feeling. Even though you got the deal and you got the sale and you made your money, you also want to have referral business from these sellers, and you want to have a quality relationship throughout this transaction and many others with them down the road. I've done so many deals with repeat clients. If you're pricing something considerably below market, that's a bad sign. Again, understand location, really important. That honestly, the oldest saying in real estate, location, location, location. You just can't change it. Natural light is a big thing. I always tell people you cannot buy natural light. So that doesn't really move the needle on pricing a ton when you're valuing it, but it can absolutely help sell the property. We've actually done showings at specific times when we know the sun's going to hit the home best. So something to think about. You're going to build confidence. The more pricing strategies and the more comps you guys run, the better you're going to get at it. If you haven't done any, I understand that. You're going to start at ground zero, build the comp set with one property, then go and do another one, a trial. Just pick out your parents' house or your cousin's house and do a comp set for that. You have to start practicing. The only way to get better at anything is practice. And I always use this analogy with my kids when they're frustrated, whether it's in school or even a social activity or anything, skiing. You learn to ride a bike. It didn't happen in one day. It takes time. So same thing with business. You have to practice. You have to put in the work, and you have to continue to do the practices and the processes that are involved in real estate brokerage every single day. And there's so many levels. I mean, I look back at this as like call 17, and all of them are unique. We have 50 to 100 things that we do on any one given deal. So it's a pretty, it's a tough job. Every step of the way, this is a difficult place to be. But if you guys put in the work and you practice all of these disciplines, you're going to be a fantastic broker, and people are going to like you and they're going to gravitate towards you when they're ready to sell or when they're ready to buy. Whether you're even when you're at, my gosh, I get people at parties all the time. What's my house worth? Like, that is the worst situation to be in. And I don't envy any broker answering that question. I always kind of defer, but you're going to start getting more and more inquiries in social events the more and more you let people know that you're brokers. Just to close this out with the seller, when you're presenting this pricing strategy to them, you want to outline how you came to this number and the specific properties you used and why. Data doesn't lie. It really doesn't. And again, fast moving markets, you're going to see some pricing movement within a micro, timeline, weeks, even months. But explain to them your strategy. Let them know that you're there to price it appropriately. You're not shooting for the moon. You can discuss pricing with them, and you're always open to their input and their ideas. If sellers really want to price it significantly higher than where you suggest pricing, let them know that you're there for them and you want to be that broker, but also let them know that if we don't get any offers in the first 2 to 4 weeks, we have to get back and do a price change. We have to start hitting our target market, educate them on pricing thresholds, and that people don't really negotiate in our industry in the low ball range. People like to stay within 95 to 100% of the list price. That is the norm, and that's how you sell your home at the right price. The best chance we have of getting the highest price for any seller is in the first 14 to 30 days. After that, it's a slippery slope. People will notice market time. It is a public number. They're going to start kicking you around. Properties with 1,000-day market times have stigmas, and it's not easy to sell them. So educate your sellers, explain to them why you're here and why you're doing what you're doing, and make sure that they know that you're there not only to get them the best price humanly possible, but in the right timeline. And I've said this before, it's a double-edged sword. Sometimes you sell it in a week and sellers are like, we didn't price it at the right price, but you did. And you can go back to them and tell them why you did. And if it's on the market too long, they're like, oh, my cousin Larry sold it in a week. Why are we on the market for 30 days? Sometimes you have to explain to them that maybe your pricing was wrong. Or you could say, hey, I told you to price at $399. You're the one that wanted to go on at $475. So have the data, take the notes, make sure you're sending emails to your clients with follow-up information after every call so you can reference those, not to throw it in their face, but just to have topics of conversation with your clients so they know that you're doing what you're doing for the right reason with data supporting it. That wraps up today. If you guys have any questions, welcome to fire away.
I have a question. How do you handle it when the comps and the market conditions reflect a listing price that is the same or less than what the seller paid for the property?
Yeah, you just dealt with that, Nina. It's not fun.
Right.
It's also not fun when you're the buyer's agent that put them in that home, and then 3 years later you go to sell it and it's at the same price. That's market conditions. We don't always have an appreciating market. And especially in some areas, they will lie dormant or flat for 5 to 10 years. As long as you felt like you did the right pricing strategy on the purchase, you have nothing to be ashamed of. Your job is to sell the property because they have a life event that needs them to move. If it is a pure play revenue game and they're like, oh, I'm not making any money, I'm going to stick it out here, fine. You've educated them, and we talked about that, and what that looks like. But if they have to sell, you let them know why it's at this price, why it hasn't appreciated in the past 3 years, and you can do a look back of the past 24 months, even 3 years, and show them what the pricing strategy was. It's humbling. You can try and adjust your commission a little bit. If we typically charge 6%, maybe you tell them you'll do it for 5%, and you're saving them some money. There's some feel-good stories there. It's not easy. It's not an easy conversation to have, but it is reality. I've gone into listing appointments where they are losing money, significant amounts of money. And I wasn't the buyer's agent, so that feels a little better. But if you're the buyer's agent, it can hurt.
Yeah, I had a listing a couple years back where she purchased, it was a garden unit up in Edgewater. She purchased in like 2006, and it had not appreciated in that like 20 years.
Garden units, honestly, I've talked so many people out of buying garden units in the city. It's so hard to unwind out of them. The market time on garden units is literally 6x any given unit, maybe 10x. There's a very small buyer pool that wants to live in a garden unit. There's obviously flooding issues, moisture, dampness, light. It's not great. I've always joked with buyers. I'd be like, listen, you're going to need to sign a waiver if you are buying this garden unit, because I just don't support it. I really don't. So it's something you need to put into your repertoire. You need to talk people out of properties that you really don't feel are going to be a good long game investment, because that's your job.
Yeah, for sure.
Amanda, what's the average amount of time you spend on pricing a listing?
Entirely too long. Yeah,
But you're getting better, right?
I mean, it depends. It's, if there are comps that just, they're not as uniform, like this most recent one, the lot size, the interior condition, no basement. I just don't know, how much weight or dollar value I need to assign to those. So I do have a lot of difficulty with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And there is no perfect science when you're talking about how much does land actually attribute to value. If you're doing a apples to apples comparison on a house and one house has additional square footage, you have to dig in and you have to look at that bigger comp set and see what some of those larger lots have sold for and make adjustments versus your house. So it's a two-way street. You can always adjust up and adjust down. Just really understand the data.
Yeah. When assessors are doing that, I mean, is that just kind of like a personal value that they're putting on their like CMA that they complete?
Appraisers or assessors?
Assessors, yeah, excuse me.
Like the Cook County assessor.
No, excuse me, appraiser.
Yeah, I thought you were talking about an appraiser. Yeah, an appraiser. So appraisers are using algorithms and they're using prefab checkboxes that spit out values. They're also using comps. But yeah, they're doing the exact same thing, and they're just verifying values for us as real estate brokers to make sure that the bank is lending on the property and it has a general ballpark value. It's no coincidence that 99% of appraisals come in at the sale price. They're just there to verify the value, not really to dictate value. We're not having a lot of appraisal issues, but yes, they're using square footage. Cool. Any other questions, guys? Cool. I really appreciate you joining. See you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, guys.